Okay, good evening everyone. DK here, Mr. V Amps. I'm going to talk a little bit about current production vacuum tubes. If you're buying current production vacuum tubes, you're going to get them from one of three places. Russia. There's one plant that makes all of these in Russia. It's called Reflector. It's got another name too, Tung-Sol Pol something. But Russia, China, or the Slovak Republic. Da-da-da. So there's three plants. There's a lot of brands, but there's only three plants cranking out vacuum tubes currently. There used to be two in Russia, but now we're down to one. And that's okay. All the tubes produced in the Slovak Republic, to my knowledge, sell under the JJ brand, unless they've had the labels rubbed off and put back on. Now, there's a group of tubes selling under the Telefunken brand name, which was traditionally a German name. They're said to be made by JJ, but somebody at JJ was talked to by a JJ dealer, and there's just something fishy going on with that. So, till we know, I don't know. So, that's the JJ plant. That's Slovak Republic. All of these Chinese tubes, sometimes they call them Sino, S-I-N-O. Sometimes they don't have a logo. This one has that sort of, I don't know, I guess it's a deformed seagull logo. But these come from the Shuguang plant, and there's a number of those. And then the rest of them, and I mean there's a lot of brands. Your Savtec, your current production Tung-Sol, your current production Electro-Harmonics, your current production Mullard, and Genelex, and there's something else. But those are all coming out of that Russian plant. So let's just talk about what our choices are in the good and the bad of it all. Okay? Okay. So this is a China 12AX7. They're extremely easy to identify because you can always pick them out, whether it's the 12AX or the 12AT. You look for that sort of shiny metal clip. See that shiny metal clip? You see that, you know you got a Shuguang made tube. And I see these things selling under the Shuguang name and under Ruby tubes and Groove tubes and everything else. These tubes should sell retail for about $9 or $10. So if somebody's got these marked up to 20, like Tube Amp Doctor or something, I wouldn't go for it. The JJ tubes generally are okay. For hi-fi amps, they have a long plated version of a 12AX7. This is the shorter plated version. They work fine in guitar amps. They tend to be a little bit less gainy, a little bit more mellow, but they're okay, and these tubes can be had for about $10. The Russian military tube that's been around forever, this is actually an older production, so the plates are shinier on the older production than they are on the new. The new ones are sort of charcoal. This is a Savtec 12AX7. They're not known for sounding beautiful, but they're a Russian military tube, and they are just absolutely tough as nails. These old Savtec tubes, and still today, the current production Savtec tubes, these are based on military tubes. Like this thing is marked 5881/6L6 WGC. Yeah, if you have a guitar amp that shipped with these, there was one, it was the Epiphone Blues Custom. Yeah, if you want to change these tubes, don't buy a 5881. See, there's a tube out, a 5881, a Tung-Sol 5881. Don't put this in your Blues Custom. Why? Look at the plates. See how much? There's a little bit less real estate in there. These are a lower power tube. They dissipate less watts, and as you can see, that label is very discolored, and the amp was very, very angry. The dear folks at thetubestore.com apologize profusely for recommending these for a Blues Custom, and since have learned their lesson and suggested 6L6 GCs for all Blues Customs ever since. This 5881 is fine for an amp engineer to take a 5881, but that's not the Blues Custom. Silly, silly, silly tube vendor. That's actually a cathode bias type amp though, so you can plug and play your tubes, which is cool. And here's a Chinese Shuguang 6L6GC. These are a little harder to come by, but they're the least expensive tube, and we used to see the Savtec tubes in everything because they used to be the least expensive tube, and then the Chinese entered the market, and now we see a lot of these. These tubes actually sound okay. Their gain factor is okay. The bass is wobbly. That's like not nailed on there good. That thing wiggle. I don't know. So I wouldn't trust that in my guitar amp unless my guitar amp had the cap, you know, over the top with the springs to hold that thing down so it couldn't wobble. But that said, these things say they work. You know, they work. If you do a lot of repairs and you're working on mystery amps and question amps and things that come in without any tubes in them, cheap junk tubes, don't throw them away. You pull a bunch of Chinese tubes out of an amp, don't throw them away. Throw them in the bin, because you're going to get one of those weird amps that you're going to wonder what's wrong with it, and you can plug in some tubes that may be sacrificial tubes, and keep those around for that purpose. This big boy is a KT88 Electro Harmonics. What a big boy that is. This is going in a bass amp project we're doing. But this is basically the same conceptual Savtec Russian military tube. They're built like tanks. And there's also a KT88 Tung-Sol and I think a Genelex. And Electro Harmonics, basically sort of the fidelity order of things. Savtec is the most durable, but not necessarily the nicest sounding per se. The musician marketed version would be the Electro Harmonics. Obviously they're known for pedals and guitar things, so they're marketing these to the guitarist, and some of the hi-fi guys are picking up on them. The Tung-Sol is again more marketed to the hi-fi market, but the guitar guys are picking up on them, and then the Genelex is supposed to be the ultra hi-fi. With the pricing on the Genelex and stuff like that, in the guitar amps I'm sort of looking for a balance between the durability and the sound, so I'm generally not going above the Tung-Sol dollar mark at this point in time. And I haven't had any problems with the Tung-Sol brand tubes. They've been very good when used in the recommended application. This is the Tung-Sol 12AX7, made in Russia. Little black plate job, nice short plates, stocky, fits in the bottle well, good high gain, like this thing a lot. Let's compare this one to its counterpart, the Savtec. You can see they have made some changes. This is a little different. It is a revised design. You can see how much more narrow that one is there. I like these. These are my favorite current production 12AX7 for general purposes. Now there are some more expensive ones out there I haven't tried, but I'm not about to drop $40 a piece on 12AX7s when they're going into a guitar amp that's probably going to be dropped and rattled around. Durability, durability, durability. Durability plus good sound. That's what I like. So my biggest point of this video is most of these tubes will work pretty well, but once in a while a manufacturer will put out a few stinkers. Tubes that are out of spec and don't belong, advertised the way they were. The tube store, the one dealer, made a mistake recommending the 5881 for an amp that should have been taking 6L6s. But again, this thing labeled as 5881 or 6L6 WGC is questionable. This is a military tube that will work in place of, but it wasn't originally designed as an audio tube. That's sort of been remedied. But there's just a few tubes to avoid. In my personal opinion, the Chinese 12AX7s, I do not like the way they sound. Personal opinion. I don't think they're bad tubes, in fact, the way they work. Of course, I have probably going to get blasted in the comment section, but if I need an oscillator for my tremolo or something that I'm not actually going to hear, it's an okay thing. We can use it for that, or we can use it in our sacrificial tubes in the amp that we don't know if it's going to blow up. And if you fix amps and you upgrade tubes a lot, you're going to have these things around like litter because they come stock in so many amplifiers. The one tube I hope they fixed. I seriously hope they fixed. This is a 7591. 7591 is a popular vacuum tube in Scott and Fisher and Harman Kardon hi-fi amps of the 50s and 60s. The JJ version of this tube, there's just something not right about it. It fails. There was something wrong with this. I don't know if they've fixed it since, but a lot of people who have had these put in the last couple of years have given these things huge red flags, and you can see them slammed on the reviews. So I hope they've upgraded it. I hope they've corrected it. If you need 7591s, I would suggest going to the Russian plant and buying like a Tung-Sol or something like that. But as far as the tubes manufactured under the Groove Tubes brand or the Ruby Tubes brand, or under your guitar amp brand like Fender Tubes or let's see, there's going to be, Fender's got theirs, PV puts out theirs. They're just going to be tested, rebranded tubes from one of these plants. They're nothing new. So the tube is probably going to be a Savtec. We'll bring both of our Savtecs in. There's our Savtec. These tubes were commonly sold as Fender. I have no idea what PV's rebranding. I'm going to guess they're probably doing Savtec, or maybe they're rebranding JJ. You know, JJs I've seen show up as branded tubes. But most of the time, it's these things. You know, Tube Amp Doctor and Ruby and these guys, a lot of times are doing the Chinese. Now, they're said to have given you and sold you the pick of the litter, or we had these specially made for us in a, you know, whatever. I don't know. But personal success story is the Russian plant that makes the Tung-Sols had real good success with these. Like these a lot. And with the exception of the 7591, I'm okay with JJ. It's probably the most economical tube that I would use routinely. But I've only been stung by these 7591s, and then there was a 12AT7 that was annoyed as being a phase inverter in a particular amp, but it worked fine other places. So I'm going to say, out of the current production plants, my favorite would be the Reflector plant, which is actually owned in part by Electro Harmonics. Hi guys, you can sponsor my channel, that would be great, but no. So that's the guys that were originally cranking out Savtec stuff, and then Matthews got involved here, and now we have the Electro Harmonics, the Tung-Sol, the Genelex, the Mullard. All of those are coming out of that plant, and they're getting better. They've been progressively getting better. These Savtec 12AX7 WAs are really kind of gritty and nasty sounding, but the 12AX7 LPS model, the LPS Savtec is good too. Sounds good, works good. And generally, so the Savtec plant has a lot of experience with military tubes. So when you think military, you kind of think durability. We look at the space programs that we had between the US and Russia, and the US developed ways to make their ships lighter so they could get them to outer space. The Russians stuck with their tubes and their heavier stuff and figured out how to make their engines more powerful to get things into space. So the Russian companies do have a lot of practice making vacuum tubes. They stuck with them when the US went transistor. So I'm not opposed to the international suppliers, and I think if any of the manufacturers have the most practice and the most experience right now, it would be the Russian plant making these. Rest in peace to the SED, or the Winged C plant, that was cranking out some tubes before. They were formerly called Svetlana, and then they forgot to re-trademark their name, and these guys slapped the trademark on it and stole their name from them. That's kind of a dick move in business, but it is what it is. So if you're buying current production vacuum tubes, they're coming from one of 3 places. So don't fall for magic. You know what you're buying. Just get an idea and stick with what works. I'll be glad to give you a couple of opinions, but usually a tube vendor, like if you're buying from the thetubestore.com. Those guys are okay. They're cool. TubeDepot.com is cool. Antique Electronics Supply or Amplified Parts. They're both owned by CE Distribution. Good people to buy tubes from. They will take your tubes out of the box and test them ahead of time. So the person selling the tube will weed out the bad tubes as opposed to waiting for somebody like Groove Tubes or Ruby or somebody like that to try and weed them out for you. So if the vendor weeds them out, you can buy them under the original brands, save a couple bucks. Saving money's good. Don't spend too much money. Buy under the original brands, original manufacturers, cost less money. Rebranding is a strain on your wallet. Okay, so that's just a little bit of opinion, a little bit of rambling, but for all current production tubes, one of 3 plants, some good, some bad, but you'll form an opinion. You know, you roll a couple different tubes, but my general consensus is the military tubes are the best current production, and if you find a bunch of leftover U.S. military tubes, by all means, go ahead and buy them. You might like them. Hey, whatever works for you. Okay, hopefully that clears it up. Probably didn't. That was rambling. I'm going to post this anyway. Have a great night. Okay, this is just some stupid addendum to our video, which was a bunch of rambling. This is a Westinghouse tube. You might recognize this from the Braddock amp, but this is an 807. An 807, popularly used in radios, but also used in one of my guitar amps. I thought this was funny because there are different military numbers for tubes. The military version of an 807 actually has a different number and it's a different shape. It's actually short and stout. I do have one of those in the bin. I should have brought it out. But the Chinese number for it is very, very funny. I don't know if we can read that. Can we read that? It says FU7. So it's the first vacuum tube I've ever had that told me FU. Wonderful. It did work, but it says FU. Go figure. Okay, good night.